Hey everyone, my name is Sara Harberson. I'm America's College Counselor, and I'm back again with another Facebook Live. I'm going to give everybody a chance to join. It is a busy night here at our house. I don't know about all of you. This is a busy time of year for most high school students. I just finished a Zoom call with our test prep partner, Franklin Yard, for our Application Nation class of 2025 students. Lots of questions about the March SAT still, what to expect from future tests. So you might have questions about SAT, ACT. A number of colleges have been announcing that they are reinstating their standardized testing policy. We have seniors wrapping up their college admissions process and making their final decision right now. And we have freshmen, sophomores, and juniors getting really, ramped up for this college admissions process. So these Facebook Live Q&As are great for high school students, for parents, for adults who are helping students go through the application process. Also, school counselors are always welcome. I was once a college counselor at a high school, so I know exactly what you're going through. But this is also a chance for you to really ask the questions that you've been wondering, because I've been doing this for 25 years, and I did it on the college side of the process, as an admissions officer, as an associate dean, as a dean of admissions and financial aid. As I mentioned, I've worked at a high school as a college counselor, director of college counseling, but now I spend my days working with Application Nation families. So what I'm going to do is, if you have questions, you can put them in the comments section, and I will try to answer as many questions as I can tonight. So first question comes in for students who are on an IEP and or 504 and have successfully navigated learning disabilities in high school. Excellent, I'm incredibly impressed. Is it okay to talk about that in the essay? Will schools use this information against the student? This is a great question. I'm a mom of a child who has an IEP and a 504, so I understand where you're coming from. I'm super impressed that the student has been able to be successful in high school. That's our goal with our child as well when she gets there. But it's interesting because I often will say that the college admissions office is about 10 to 20 years behind what's really going on campus, because at most colleges these days, you can find a really strong academic support system in place for when students matriculate or enroll. But the admissions office in the past has not always been as fair to these students. So maybe I'm just scarred because I saw it happen firsthand when I worked on the college side of this process. I'm not a huge fan of students writing about their learning difference in their application. I don't want anything to be held against them. What I have seen, though, a couple of exceptions over the years, not many, but there have been a couple of the students that I've worked with that have felt really, really strongly that they are defined by that LD that they continue to have, because I think they continue to have it even though they are successful. Those students who write an essay about it, if their academic record and their test scores and everything is super, super strong and they've got a really unusual angle to that essay, I think it can go over really, really well. But if there are any issues or weaker grades or less rigor on the academic record, or the scores are really lower than what the college expects, I don't think that would help the student in the admissions process. Now, I am someone who speaks out about this issue constantly, not only as a student advocate and an expert in college admissions, but also a mom. So I will continue to speak up until college admissions offices treat students fairly in the admissions process. Another question. Can you please talk about homegrown projects for biology majors? And if AP Statistics or AP Macro is better to take if you want to major in biology. Thanks for all you do. Okay, so let's take the easy question first. If you want to be a biology major, what classes should you be taking? I would say that if you're aiming for more selective colleges, you definitely want to have all of your traditional science classes taken in high school. So a full year of biology, a full year of chemistry, a full year of physics, and then ideally the highest level biology class, like AP biology, for example, if your high school offers AP classes. But math is just as important for a biology or any type of science major, including engineering applicants. So we want to make sure that you have the strongest math that you are comfortable taking. Ideally, that you have calculus by senior year. What I will say is that AP classes are great. They definitely impress admissions officers, but some are more impressive than others. So I would never take AP Statistics in place of, let's say, AP Calculus, but if the student has room in their schedule, I think AP Statistics would be a nice additional class, but it's absolutely not necessary. AP Macroeconomics is going to count as a history or social studies or social science in the 5-4 plan that I recommend, which is taking your 5 core classes for all 4 years of high school. So it could definitely be taken if it is a full year class. That would be great. If not, you partner it or take the second half like AP Micro or another half year AP Social Science. So that's fine to count for your history or social science. I don't think it would necessarily directly provide evidence for the biology major, but we always want to see English, math, history or social studies, a foreign language or an ancient language, and science every single year of high school. Now, in terms of homegrown projects, that's definitely more complicated. I wrote about homegrown projects in my book, SOUNDBITE, so if you want, you can check that out. I talk a lot about homegrown projects in our application nation groups because I think a lot of students think that they have to get some big research job at a lab at a university and they have to have published research to impress colleges, and that's just simply not the case. Homegrown projects are ones that are designed and self-directed by the student. So they don't have an official mentor. You don't need one, but obviously any faculty member at your school can be helpful, or even a professional in your community. But ideally, you are organizing and pursuing a homegrown project that ideally is going to support something else in your application, like your major choice. A homegrown project, I'm not a STEM person, but in terms of a homegrown project, if you want to be a biology major, think about anything that you're interested in biology. Get as specialized and as specific as possible. Because when you think about biology or business or English or history, those are huge disciplines. So it's much easier for the student to kind of narrow in on exactly what they love about that subject matter. And design a project in a set period of time. It could be the summer between junior and senior year. It could be an ongoing project throughout high school. You can do it in your basement. You can do it in your room. You can also check with your high school to see if you're able to use any of the classrooms, lab equipment for the biology program or the science department at your high school. Hi, Shannon. I just met someone that knows you, Shannon, really, really well. Okay, aloha, Sara. What have you seen as the biggest changes my AN 2026 should look out for since my AN 2023 was applying to college? This is such a great question. So I hope I can be helpful for a lot of families with younger students that might have had older students just go through this process. What I can tell you is I've been in this for 25 years. For the first 20 years of my career, change rarely happened in our industry. It was really slow. And then about 5 years ago, the admission scandal happened. 4 years ago, the pandemic happened. And over the last 5 years, we've seen major changes in every aspect of this process. So for younger students compared to maybe an older sibling, this is what you should be thinking about. Yes, there are still a lot of test optional colleges and universities out there. I think there are over 1,800 at this point. I can tell you that there are more colleges reinstating standardized testing as part of admission, meaning that the SAT or ACT is required. And even those colleges, especially the highly selective ones that are still test optional, we are seeing in our Application Nation data in terms of acceptances that the students getting admitted to those test optional, highly selective colleges and universities almost always are reporting scores and reporting high scores at that. The students who are applying test optional to those highly selected colleges with a test optional policy are not seeing the same results. So I think invest in test prep. That is really my best advice for younger families. We're also seeing that some colleges are making changes about what is required. It used to be that, most colleges were asking for a letter of recommendation from the student's counselor of record at their high school and 2 teacher recommendation letters. We're seeing a lot of colleges reduce that number to 1 or possibly no letters of recommendation. And this is a result of how quickly these admissions officers are being expected to read applications. So those are the 2 big ones. I would also say that family responsibilities have really gained prominence since the pandemic hit. And so a lot of students that have major responsibilities at home, like caring for younger siblings every single day, every week, caring for a parent or an elderly grandparent who is ill, if it is a huge time commitment, that is highly respected and highly regarded. And time commitment is still a huge factor when admissions officers are looking at your activities. So the longer that you do an activity through high school, like 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, that's going to make more of an impact than something that you just joined in senior year. And in terms of hours per week, the number of hours per week and weeks per year really do matter in this admissions process. But as always, the quality of your activities and time commitments are much more important than how many activities you actually have. So I hope that's been helpful. What is your process for new students? In my case, a junior. Where do you start with them? And then I don't see the rest of the question, but I might catch up to it later. So what is my process? Well, I don't do private college counseling. I don't do it because when I was going through this process, I could never have afforded a private college counselor. So Application Nation really is a community, an online community that brings in students and families from 49 states in the United States, 23 different countries, and all socioeconomic backgrounds. And when you join Application Nation Class of 2025, if you're a junior, you're gonna see all of these free resources in the group that are just for members. So all the Zoom calls that we already had, always recorded, all the resources that I shared, you will see them, and then you will immediately be able to start asking us questions, the Application Nation team, immediately. We are responding actually 24/7 on the board, and we also have additional add-on offers like essay editing and college list reviews and mock interviews and application reviews if you are interested. But so many families take advantage of everything that's in the group that they sometimes don't need any add-ons. My friend is currently deciding between Davidson, Colgate, Wake Forest, and Richmond, of course. Oh my gosh, yes, that's right. I'm pushing for Richmond. I remember you from last year. So you must be a freshman at Richmond at this point. Well, he would be in good company, your friend, or your friend would be in good company if they join you at Richmond, but such great schools. Best advice that I can give a student that's trying to make a final decision, try to narrow it down to 2 choices, especially at this point, and hopefully your friend has been able to go back and do the admitted student programs, because that will really give your friend a sense of whether or not the school is the right fit for them. But I love all those schools. All right, next question. My son already has 3 years of high school credit for Chinese as it's his native language. Do you think it's still, let me see if I can see the rest of the question. Do you think it's still advisable for him to take another language course in high school? Okay, let's unpack this because this is complex. I always recommend that the student take foreign language or ancient language in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade if there are courses available for them to take at their high school. Yes, there are going to be some students who start 9th grade that are already advanced in that language because of what they took in middle school or because it's their native language, but ideally we want that student continuing to take that language for all 4 years of high school. So I can't tell what grade your child is in, but just because they have 3 years of high school credit, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've exhausted all of the classes at their high school. So that would be first and foremost. Admissions officers and myself were not big fans. I once was an admissions officer. We're not big fans of students that do like a year of one language and 3 years of another language in high school, or 2 and 2. We really like students to stick with one consistent language because their proficiency will be a lot stronger in that one language, and most colleges have some type of foreign language requirement. If it's the student's native language, that's okay too, but I think the bar is set a little bit higher for those students, and admissions officers will want to see the student really excelling in that class. What is your advice of how to start the personal statement? Oh my gosh, we could spend weeks in terms of me giving you advice about the personal statement or the main college essay, just to give you an idea of how important it is and how important I know it is for students, is that we have 4 upcoming Zoom calls on the personal statement or main college essay between mid-May and the end of June in Application Nation class of 2025. There is so much to talk about. But the first step is really to pick the right topic. A lot of students look at the prompts and they kind of get pigeonholed. The prompts are so open-ended. Honestly, I have never seen an essay topic that doesn't fit one of the essay prompts, like on the Common App. So you want to find the topic that is really unique to you, that only you could write about. Once you have that great topic, you want to remember that it's more about showing rather than telling. And you want to show growth. You want to show a life lesson. You want to show self-reflection. And the students that are more vulnerable in their writing tend to do better on the college essay. But I'm going to be honest, they've never done this type of writing before, almost always. So as much as, English teachers and history teachers teach you how to write for their classes, the college essay has such a different feel. I mean, for me, this is what I do every single year of my life for the past 25 years. So I've read hundreds of thousands of essays. I've edited, I've reviewed, I've evaluated, I've even written tons of college essays for my Application Nation family so that they know what to expect. But it really does start with the topic, and especially with the concern about ChatGPT and AI being used by students in the admissions process. It's less about how perfectly structured your sentences are, and it's more about your topic to start and how you share pieces about who you are in the most personal and vulnerable way. With many Ivy schools announcing the return of the SAT, ACT for the next admission cycle, do you think this will trigger most other universities to do the same? We'll have to see. I think the Ivies always get a lot of attention in the news, but I looked at the list of colleges that have reinstated the SAT and ACT this year. It's only 7 colleges so far. It's not like an enormous number. Yes, there are some Ivies in there, and there's some other schools, and I think UNC Chapel Hill is about to reinstate SAT and ACT scores, at least for students with lower GPAs, but it's really not as many as you think. But we tend to focus on them. So I think the vast majority of test optional colleges continue to be test optional. Why do they do that? It can help them with their applicant pool, because being test optional means that students aren't going to get scared off by applying if they don't want to report their scores. I think some colleges are seeing a more diverse applicant pool. And a lot of long-standing test optional colleges, I was a dean of admissions at one, they know that the students are going to deliver at the same success rate as students who report scores. Now, that said, a lot of the Ivies are saying that they are reinstating the SAT, ACT because they're seeing students who didn't report scores underperform compared to the students that did report scores. Some things that we want to keep in mind. There has not actually been a graduating cohort yet. So it's really hard for a college to just say, well, students aren't doing as well if they didn't report scores. We actually don't have their 4-year experience. And we also have to remember that these were pandemic high school students and their learning absolutely was impacted. In my experience, when I was a dean of admissions at a test optional college, it was really clear. The data was clear, like decades of data. And what we saw with our students who didn't report scores, that they performed just as well as students with scores. So I'd love to see all the data. I think for some colleges, the opposite might be true, but I just think, you know, these Ivies and a lot of these schools that have, many of these schools that have changed their policies, that's what they wanted to do. And so they did it, and they're absolutely entitled. Frankly, I would say some people argue that that's better. At least they're not being disingenuous, because we've seen with these Ivies and a lot of highly selected colleges that have been test optional, that they are clearly favoring students with high scores and not the ones that are applying test optional without scores. So do I think other colleges will follow suit? I think there will be a little bit of a domino effect, but I think most schools are going to continue to be test optional that are currently test optional. But we'll have to wait and see. An admissions officer visiting my kid's school advised not to report ACT, SAT score that is below the 25th percentile reported by the school. I see other suggestions that say don't report unless it's the 75th percentile or higher for that school. How do you know if a score should be reported? For this question, assume schools being considered don't have single-digit admit rates. Assume they are test optional schools with an acceptance rate of 15% or higher. Okay, there's a lot here. It's really difficult for families to figure out whether or not their child's score is competitive enough. So let's think about the steps that you want to take. First, you want to go to a college's admissions website and look for the most current data for the most recent class admitted. I just did this for Tulane University for our Application Nation 2025 group. The latest admissions data is actually this class that was just admitted. So the current high school seniors that are going to be graduating right now, that are going to finish college ideally in 2028. I found that information right on Tulane's admissions website. And it was for admitted students. That's really important. A lot of families look at the common data set because there's so much great information there, but the test scores on the common data set are for the enrolled students. And the admitted pool of students is always going to be a stronger pool. So those are the scores you want to be looking at. It is my belief that at a bare minimum, if you are coming from what we call a majority background, meaning you are usually white or Asian American, you're coming from an overrepresented state, your parents are college educated, you go to a fairly sophisticated public or private high school, at a bare minimum, you want your score to be at least the average, but ideally in that top 25th percentile. The bottom 25th percentile are going to be for students that fill institutional priorities, recruited athletes, students coming from underrepresented backgrounds, students coming from low-income backgrounds, students coming from underrepresented states, and other institutional priorities like legacy applicants or faculty children applying. So you can't really use that bottom 25th percent of the admitted class, because almost always you're going to be that student that is a wonderful, extraordinary student, but doesn't fill one of those institutional needs. So that's the best approach that I have. You really want to rely on the college's website though. You don't want to be looking at guidebooks that are already out of date or outside resources. You want to go straight to the source, the college's admissions website. Will highly selective schools begin to de-emphasize legacy preferences this fall? Great question. I think they've been de-emphasizing legacy applicants for probably the past 10 years. And even going back further than that, we have seen that as colleges have gotten more applications and become more selective, they have not been able to be as generous with the legacy applicants. And I would say if we looked at, historically speaking, a highly selective college and looked at their acceptance rate, not that they would ever share this, by the way, looked at their acceptance rate for legacy applicants 20 years ago, it's probably a fraction of that now or half of that because there are just so many priorities going on. Legacy admissions is still a factor at most institutions. However, there are some colleges that have made public announcements, and there are certain states that have made legacy admissions no longer a policy that colleges can use. But I think the vast majority of colleges still can factor in legacy admissions. I would say the earlier round tends to be better for legacy applicants, but they're not going to see the advantages that they once saw. And that's simply because the applicant pool has become so much more diverse, not just racially, but geographically, socioeconomically, and even in terms of the high schools being represented as well. My daughter is a sophomore. When should she start getting letters of recommendation? In Application Nation, I recommend that my students reach out to their academic core teachers in the spring of junior year, and I have a whole plan about what they need to do. And I would say most high schools are not going to let students ask teachers anytime before that. Now, if you were like me, I went to a public high school that was lower performing. There weren't a lot of students applying to college where I went, especially at the time. And so I didn't know that you're supposed to ask teachers in the spring of junior year. I asked teachers in the fall of senior year at the very last minute. So we really do try to get ahead of everything, every step of the process in AN, Application Nation. But junior year is when you would do it, spring junior year. And it's great that you're already thinking about this. It's wonderful when younger students are thinking about these teachers as not just the people who give them grades, but potentially could write great letters of recommendation. So building strong relationships with your teachers is a good thing. Talking to them outside of class about your interests, about your academic areas that you want to pursue in college. If you have an idea for a homegrown project, you can bounce ideas off of them, but usually the junior year core teachers, and that would be English, math, science, history, or language, are going to be the teachers you're going to be asking. Do you think College Board will be adapting the SAT digital exam questions in the database now that some test data is available to see how students are doing on the new test format? Okay. So, College Board, they act like a business, they are not there to make things easy on students by any means. I think there was a lot of concern about the March digital SAT. That was the first full-blown digital SAT here in the United States. But as we heard from Franklin Yard, who is a test prep company that we partner with in Application Nation, they said, this is not unusual. When the College Board makes a major change to the SAT, there often is some uncertainty, some things that don't always make sense with that first test, but oftentimes the tests that happen afterwards are going to start to recalibrate a little bit. Franklin Yard also mentioned that, I think it was the day after the digital SAT in March, the College Board released additional practice tests. Now, why did they wait until the day after? You tell me, right? But there are more resources available, and I think that can be really helpful for students who are going to be taking the digital SAT moving forward, because the students who took it in March, There were very limited options for them to study. I think there were just a couple of practice tests and nothing more. So I think moving forward, the students who are planning to take the digital SAT are going to have more and more information. But in the end, I think, the scores will even out, and there won't be a huge difference between what the student did on a paper test versus the digital, or at least that's the hope. Is it okay to take a credit class for enrichment at an online high school and not report it on Common App? We are not trying to get credit at our bricks and mortar high school. Okay. So technically speaking, any class that is credit bearing, even if it's just pass fail, should be reported in the application. So there should be an official transcript from that online high school, or sometimes your bricks and mortar high school will put online classes on your transcript for you. But technically speaking, they're supposed to be reported. You may not hear this from admissions officers, but I can tell you that any class that's taken pass fail, especially a core class, it doesn't get a lot of respect, and it tends to raise some red flags with admissions officers. So it's really important, especially with your core classes, that you're taking credit-bearing, grade-bearing classes. Would you recommend summer programs with colleges that you have to pay money, or should my 16-year-old just get a summer job? Okay. My answer's pretty, straight. I always say I'm from New Jersey. I don't like to beat around the bush. Please do not spend hundreds or usually thousands of dollars so that your child can do a summer program on a college campus. Those are called pay-to-play programs, and most colleges are not expecting a student to do that, nor do they respect that because it takes money to do that, and that infers privilege. And most admissions officers would much rather see the student do something in their community, in their town, giving back, or doing anything that isn't going to cost money in the summer. So yes, get a summer job, help out your younger siblings, help out an elderly grandparent, volunteer, especially if you haven't been able to get any volunteer hours during the school year, work on a homegrown project. These are all, actually even more impressive than doing a pay-to-play summer program. Now, there are exceptions, and that's because college admissions is full of contradictions. And so students who do performing arts programs during the summer or fine arts programs, it actually builds up your portfolio, and they aren't viewed the same as the general pay-to-play programs. But almost always I say to avoid those pay-to-play programs because you're spending so much money on something that is not going to be as valued as you think in the admissions process. Would it be advantageous for kids with extremely high SAT scores to focus on schools that require SAT scores? Well, those students are in a great position. They can focus on colleges that require scores. They should even focus on those test optional colleges. That's the thing that the myth. They think that a test optional college doesn't care about high test scores. Oh, yes, they do. If it's a test optional college, they're still reporting average SAT and ACT scores. They want the highest scores they can get. So yes, that's going to be advantageous for a student, especially I would say those test optional schools, because they're looking for those high scores to admit and possibly give merit scholarships if they offer it. Hi, Sara Harberson. Thank you for all the wonderful information. What's your take on providing art music portfolios when it's not required? Will there be a negative impact? Thank you. Okay, great question. There are going to be a lot of students that want to send additional information. If I am really being honest, I didn't know any better. My dad laminated, I think, every newspaper article that I was ever in. And he made me include that with every application I submitted. Now that I work in this industry, I can tell you, do not do that. And I'm really cautious about sending anything extra. I think for a student that is an exceptional artist, performing artist or fine artist, and they are planning to major in that in college, and they're listing that major, and they have an exceptional portfolio that they have heard from artists and art teachers or music teachers or professional musicians that they have something really special and they are truly gifted, then yes, I would recommend submitting that portfolio. But if you're listing another major, the likelihood of that portfolio being reviewed is extremely low. We got so many, especially when I worked at Penn, that in the end, I only passed along the portfolios to the fine arts department or the music department if the student looked really competitive and I thought they had a shot, and they listed that major, fine arts or music on their application. But could it backfire? Yeah, it could. These are faculty members working at universities, teaching and seeing incredible talent. If they don't think the student's portfolio is exceptional and they just say it's good but not great, that's the feedback they're going to send to the admissions office. And for a college that has a really low acceptance rate, that can be enough of a reason. Something that wasn't even required, that can be enough of a reason for the student not to be admitted. What about when your student has developed a relationship with their counselor and the counselor leaves the school at the end of junior year? This happens a lot. Before they get a letter of recommendation and other help, what would be a good plan B? Okay, this happens a lot. Sadly, there's a lot of turnover within schools and even within admissions offices. So you could build up a great relationship with your counselor of record at your high school, and they could retire, they could go to another school, they could leave education completely, and you are assigned a brand new counselor of record. And they may not know you that well. So what should you do? I don't recommend asking the counselor that is leaving the school to write you a letter of recommendation. A lot can change from the spring of junior year to the fall of senior year when you begin to submit applications. And that letter is outdated by the time you apply. And it is much better and much smarter to really lean on your new counselor. And that means you might have to, work a little bit harder to get to know them, stop in, talk to them, share as much as possible. The moment you get assigned that counselor, the moment that new counselor is announced, you can start building up that relationship. But keep in mind, because of so much turnover, because there is such a range of time that school counselors can spend with students, because of rising caseloads, these colleges understand that the letter coming from the school counselor oftentimes is not as detailed as the letters of recommendation from academic core teachers. So do your best to get to know your new counselor. Make sure that they're writing your letter, because if the college has any questions, that's who they're going to be contacting at the school. They can't contact the counselor that left in the spring of junior year. So school counselors, they're going to change. Their letter of recommendation may not be as detailed as you want it, and that is why picking the right teachers for your letters of recommendation can be really helpful. And that's why a lot of colleges now are not requiring a letter of recommendation from the school counselor, so keep that in mind. All right, it's past 10 o'clock here on the East Coast. I haven't eaten dinner. I've got to make sure my kids are headed to bed, so I'm going to wrap up, but it's always good to see all of you. I started with Facebook Lives, and I hope I can continue to do that because I get to reach so many of you and be able to answer questions the same way that I do with my families in Application Nation. Obviously, if you want to join Application Nation, we have links here, and you can go to my website very easily, but I will continue to offer Facebook Lives when I can, my weekly blogs, and a lot of free resources that you can access. Take care, everyone. Have a great night.